The Government of India has advanced the target for 20% ethanol blending in petrol to 2025 from 2030. The roadmap proposes a gradual rollout of ethanol blended fuel to achieve E10 fuel supply by April 2022 and phased rollout of E20 from April 2023 to April 2025. This important measure is aimed at reducing India's oil import bill and carbon dioxide pollution, as well as improving India's energy security. Currently, 8.5% of ethanol is blended with petrol in India. India imported some 198 million tons of crude oil in 2020-2021, with a net import cost of about $63 billion. It is estimated that the E20 program can save the country $4 billion or rupees 30,000 crores per annum. Last year alone, oil companies procured ethanol worth rupees 21,000 crores, a move which benefits the farmers of the country as well as the sugar manufacturing industry. The government also plans to encourage the use of water-sparing crops such as maize to produce ethanol, as well as the production of ethanol from non-food feedstock. To increase production of fuel-grade ethanol and to achieve blending targets, the government has allowed use of surplus stocks of maize and rice with the Food Corporation of India for production of ethanol. Other measures to make ethanol production more cost-effective is the reduction of the GST rate from 18% to 5% on ethanol meant for blending under the Ethanol Blended Petrol Program.
In biofuel usage, India set a very ambitious target many years ago of trying to get to 20% blending of ethanol in petrol and biodiesel in diesel. However, that has taken a while to mature. And then in 2018, with a transformational new policy, both the deployment of biofuels and the research into new biofuels has gained momentum. Today, we are blending close to 10% ethanol on an average across the country. Biodiesel blending is still very low, it's less than 1%, but it will hopefully pick up with a lot of new initiatives being taken.
So in this episode of Science for a Self-Reliant India, we will look at how ethanol is manufactured and the scientific processes involved in the production of biofuels. Our India Science team also shows you how the sugar industry, along with India's petroleum companies, are gearing up to meet this ambitious target of increasing ethanol production by nearly 150% in such a short time frame. This and much more on this episode of Science for a Self-Reliant India, only on India Science. India is the second most populous country in the world, and to meet its rapidly increasing energy demands, it has to procure over 80% of its petroleum-based requirement through imports, making it the third largest importer of crude oil after China and the USA. According to the Petroleum Planning and Analysis Cell, which is the data keeper of the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, the country imported 270 million metric tons of crude oil, valuing $120 billion in 2019-2020, and this accounts for nearly 5% of the world's total oil consumption. The energy demand in our country is rising due to an expanding economy, growing population, increasing urbanization, evolving lifestyles, and rising spending power. This is resulting in a further increase of vehicles, which in turn increase the demand for transportation fuels. Higher consumption of fossil fuels leads to higher greenhouse gas emissions, particularly carbon dioxide, which significantly contributes to global warming. And as India aims to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025, achieving energy security and transitioning to a thriving low-carbon economy are goals which need to be achieved. To address these twin problems, some serious attempts have been made in the last few years in the form of scaling up biofuel production and blending it with petrol and diesel. Domestic biofuels also provide a strategic opportunity to the country as it reduces the nation's dependence on imported fossil fuels. In addition, when utilized with appropriate care, biofuels can be environmentally friendly and are also sustainable energy sources. They can also help generate employment, doubling farmers' incomes and promote waste-to-wealth generation. India has set an ambitious target of blending 20% ethanol in petrol by 2025. In fact, the Government of India has advanced the target for 20% ethanol blending in petrol to the year 2025 from 2030. This fuel type is also called E20. This new initiative is also part of measures to improve energy security and self-sufficiency of the nation. The roadmap proposes a gradual rollout of ethanol blended fuels to achieve E10 fuel supply by April 2022 and phased rollout of E20 from April 2023 to April 2025. Currently, 8.5% of ethanol is blended with petrol in India. The National Biofuel Policy 2018 has brought about revolutionary changes in the biofuel production priorities of the country, as well as expanding the scope of using a range of renewable natural sources for the production of biofuels. To incentivize the production of ethanol, the government has reduced the goods and services tax rate to 5% from 18% on ethanol meant for blending under the Ethanol Blended Petrol Program. The Government of India has also notified the oil marketing companies to procure ethanol from domestic sources. To increase production of fuel-grade ethanol and to achieve blending targets, the government has also allowed use of maize and rice stored with the Food Corporation of India for production of ethanol. The extra consumption of surplus food grains would ultimately benefit the farmers as they will get better prices for their produce and assured buyers. And this will also increase the income of farmers across the country.
The biofuel policy which came out in 2018 was truly transformational. It took major steps forward from the old biofuel policy of 2009, moved away from focusing solely on ethanol and biodiesel, and moved into the next generation fuels. The policy broadly says that it will increase biofuel availability. Instead of trying to cover everything about biofuels, it focuses on the most important thing, the supply chain. Improve ethanol and biodiesel blending across the country, ethanol in petrol, biodiesel in diesel, and realistic targets of 20% of ethanol and 5% of biodiesel by 2030 had been set in 2018. Now, what has happened is with the great success of the ethanol policy, it has been brought forward, the ethanol blending program has been brought forward to 20% by 2025 instead of 2030, 5 years forward, which is transformational and ambitious. This is simply the game changer that we were hoping for. And I think in the next 3 to 10 years, you will see big changes.
Biofuels are not a recent discovery. The trans-esterification of vegetable oils has been widely known and employed since the 19th century. In fact, the process currently in use for making biofuels from biomass is the same inherited from the past. Liquid biofuels for transport have been used since the early days of the automobile industry. Ethanol's first use was to power an engine in 1826, and in 1876, Nicholas Otto, the German inventor of the modern four-cycle internal combustion engine, used ethanol to power an early engine. In 1898, another German inventor, Rudolf Diesel, used peanut oil in the first demonstration of his compression ignition or diesel engine at the World's Exhibition in Paris. Vegetable oils were used in diesel engines until the 1920s, when an alteration was made to the engine, enabling it to use a residue of petroleum currently known as diesel fuel. ethanol was first blended with gasoline for use as an octane booster in the 1920s and 1930s and was in high demand during World War II because of fuel shortages. So what are biofuels? A biofuel is a kind of liquid fuel derived from biological material such as trees, agricultural waste, crops or grass. Since such feedstock material can be replenished readily, biofuel is considered to be a source of renewable energy, unlike fossil fuels such as petroleum, coal and natural gas. Biofuel functions similarly to non-renewable fossil fuels. Both burn when ignited and in turn release energy that can be used to power cars or heat homes. The main difference between them is that biofuels can be grown indefinitely and generally cause less damage to the planet. Biofuels are used globally as they contain no sulfur and produce low carbon monoxide and toxic emissions. The most common biofuels are ethanol and biodiesel. Ethanol is one of the principal biofuels. Ethanol is ethyl alcohol having chemical formula of C2H5OH. It can be produced from sugarcane, maize, wheat, beetroot, etc., which are high in starch content. In India, ethanol is mainly produced from sugarcane molasses by the fermentation process. Ethanol can be mixed with gasoline to form different blends such as E5, E10 and E20, in which E denotes ethanol and the number denotes the percentage of ethanol to be blended with petrol. So E20 means that the fuel will comprise of 20% ethanol and 80% petrol. Ethanol is considered to be one of the most suitable alternative blending transportation fuels due to its better fuel quality, higher octane number and environmental benefits. The second most common liquid biofuel is biodiesel, which is made primarily from oily plants such as soybean and to a lesser extent from other oily sources such as waste cooking oil from restaurants, which is used in deep frying, etc. Biodiesel has found greatest acceptance in Europe and it is used in diesel engines and usually blended with diesel fuel in various percentages. There are other biofuels also, like methane gas and biogas, which can be derived from the decomposition of biomass in the absence of oxygen. So let's see how ethanol is manufactured. The biomass or plant material is first broken down in the milling process into a form of flour or fibers. Then water is added to make it into a slurry. The slurry then goes for the fermentation process. Yeast is added into the slurry. The enzymes found in yeast are the natural catalysts and breaks sugar or glucose from plant material like sugarcane, corn and maize into ethanol and carbon dioxide. This typically takes place at temperatures of around 30 degrees Celsius. The product of the fermentation process is only 10 to 15% ethanol. It is then selectively evaporated and condensed in a process called distillation. This process produces 95% pure ethanol. This is then transported to oil manufacturing companies for blending in with petrol. 90% of the world's ethanol is made using the fermentation process. Ethanol is one of the principal biofuels used as a fuel for internal combustion engines like cars, either alone or in combination with other fuels. Ethanol is increasingly used as an oxygenate additive for standard petrol and provides high quality, high octane for exceptional engine performance and reduced emissions. The higher ratio allows for an engine to extract more energy from the combustion process due to better thermal efficiency. Higher compression ratios allow the same combustion temperatures to be achieved with less fuel. Ethanol has been used in cars since Henry Ford designed his 1908 Model T car to operate on alcohol. Ethanol is the highest performance fuel on the market and keeps today's high compression engines running smoothly because the ethanol molecule contains oxygen, which allows the engine to completely combust the fuel, resulting in reduced vehicular emissions such as hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide and particulate matter. Ethanol has a higher octane rating of 113, which means it increases the efficiency of the engine considerably. The Saraswati Sugar Mills at Yamunanagar in Haryana has installed a plant for commercial production of ethanol from the byproduct of sugar called molasses, which they get from processing the sugarcane. While the operations of this plant are yet to start, our India Science team was given exclusive access to this new ethanol production facility to get a better understanding of the processes involved in the large-scale commercial production of ethanol. The process starts from the collection of molasses in the storage tanks. This plant has 6 storage tanks that can store around 12,500 tons of molasses. Molasses is then transferred to the yeast vessels where the yeast is added and the mixture is then heated at 100 degrees Celsius for 30 hours. In this process, the starch is broken down into glucose by enzymes in the yeast. The mixture is then transferred to the fermentation tanks. There are 4 fermentation tanks at the Saraswati Sugar Mills. Here in the fermentation tanks, the temperature is maintained at around 30 degrees Celsius for 96 to 102 hours. During this process, the sugar catalyst converts into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. The extracted ethyl alcohol then goes to the distillation section where it is heated between 80 to 100 degrees Celsius and is passed through 19 screening plates. After this process, 45% pure ethanol is extracted. This 45% pure ethanol is then sent to the rectifier section where it passes through 72 screening plates and again heated at 70 to 80 degrees Celsius. After this process, we get 94% to 95% pure ethanol. The liquid then goes to the molecular sieve, which absorbs the water and other impurities from ethanol, and then 98 to 99% pure ethanol is extracted. This final product is then transported to oil marketing companies for blending it with petrol before being supplied to petrol pumps.
Factories now have the flexibility to, depending upon ethanol pricing and depending upon sugar pricing, to decide how much sugar they want to produce and how much ethanol they want to produce. That is, factories which have ethanol plants. This will help the farmers, because when there is a glut of sugar in the market, there is too much sugar in the market, the prices of sugar are falling, factories will divert the sugar cane, will produce less sugar and more ethanol, thereby reducing the sugar available in the market and increasing its price. So this has a tremendous benefit on the economy. And today the government is also encouraging making ethanol from broken or food grains which cannot be used for human consumption. So ethanol has a great future. It will provide employment, it will save foreign exchange and help India become Atmanirbhar.
The Government of India is also encouraging initiatives on the supply side of ethanol for achieving the E20 targets. The government is providing financial support for second generation or 2G ethanol production. The first generation ethanol biofuel is produced from food crops such as sugarcane, corn, maize, etc. Whereas second generation cellulosic ethanol is derived from low value biomass that possesses a high cellulose content, including wood chips, crop residues and municipal waste. Cellulosic ethanol is commonly made from sugarcane bagasse, that is a waste product from sugarcane processing. The thrust to use this alternative fuel is being given to advanced biofuels such as 2G ethanol, compressed biogas and used cooking oil-based biodiesel, etc., which can be sourced from waste such as crop residues, biomass and industrial waste that are all abundantly available in the country. Public sector oil marketing and refining companies like Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited and Indian Oil Corporation Limited have planned to set up 12 second-generation ethanol biorefineries in 11 states across the country to increase the production of ethanol.
So Atmanirbharta is not about technology alone. It is, like I said, about carbon atoms. We import roughly 350 million tons of carbon atoms for fuel every year. And you know how much we throw away as a country? We throw away more than 500 million tons. So if we just learn to collect all our waste streams which contain carbon and deploy them into fuel or use them as alternatives to fuel, we will make a huge change. India uses a lot of PNG, CNG, piped and compressed natural gas and also LPG. I believe that biogas, which is now being spurred by the Satat scheme of the government, where 5,000 biogas plants are to be set up, is the next big wave. Out of these 350 million tons of carbon atoms, almost half could come from biogas if properly captured. We hear every year about this parali being burnt, in the fields and causing pollution. Since it's being burnt, it's a fuel. So there is again a big movement, and we are seeing a lot of positive policy steps in that direction to incentivize use of this as fuel instead of coal for thermal power plants and for heat. So the more we are able to include biomass-based briquettes and pellets in thermal power plants, in boilers, in furnaces and kilns, the more Atmanirbhar we will become.
To meet the 5-year advanced target of blending 20% ethanol to petrol and to roll it out across the country as E20 fuel by 2025, India will require some 9 billion litres of ethanol, of which 7.5 billion litres will be for motor fuel and 1.5 billion litres for industrial use. That's about 6.3 billion litres more than currently produced. This massive step by the Government of India is multi-pronged, as it seeks to provide an impetus to Indian farmers by buying more produce from them. At the same time, it creates more jobs as more ethanol factories are set up. The blending of ethanol to petrol also reduces our dependence on expensive and fluctuating crude oil imports. Plus, the E20 fuel will help to fight climate change by reducing emissions of carbon dioxide. So, in a nutshell, this initiative of the government to leverage science and technology to produce large-scale ethanol is a major step towards India's growth story and our mission for self-reliance. That's all in this episode of Science for a Self-Reliant India, only on India Science.